Merry Christmas. It's the final UFC event of 2023. Thank you so much for watching my videos this year. It means a lot to me. I read every single one of your comments, and it's painful for me that I just don't have the time to respond to every single one of you because there's just too many, and that's really frustrating. I wish I could find the time to do it, but the fight research is so time consuming. You probably notice I don't post on Twitter or anything like that. I don't have much time for social media, but when I'm feeling a little bit down, when I'm feeling a little bit stressed out, when I'm feeling a bit overworked, nothing like pulls me up, puts a smile on my face more than just scrolling through the comments on my YouTube videos, because something that has changed in 2023, and I don't know why it's changed, but there's just like a lot of like positivity and a lot of love in the comments these days. There's really not much negativity around the videos that I put out, so you guys keep me going, you keep me wanting to show up and do these breakdowns every week. It really means a lot, and I'm going to keep obviously pumping out breakdown videos throughout the whole of 2024. I hope this year that I've helped you earn some extra cash with the breakdown videos that I've put out. At the very least, maybe I've saved you some money from, you know, placing bets that, you know, or not placing bets you otherwise might have placed. At the very least, I hope I've done that. It's been a pretty good year for pre-fight bets. I know I've shared quite a lot of winning bets on the channel, some losers as well. You can't win them all, but for the most part I think we've done pretty good. And yeah, we've only had 2 losing months on pre-fight bets in the whole year. During the break in the UFC schedule now, I'm going to be busy trying to build another website, because this website's very old. This website's like 4 or 5 years old, so when you go on there it's probably very confusing and stuff. So I'm going to make the most of UFC, try and improve the website. So if you've got any ideas for things I could add to the website, resources, tools, that type of thing that you might find useful, let me know in the comments below, and I'll try and develop that in the month that I've got to work on it. Any ideas to make it better, because it's really outdated, it's terrible, it's 4 or 5 years old, none of it makes sense. I want to basically burn it to the ground and build it back up, something completely new, clean slate, something more modern, something easier to work out, easier to access, works better on mobile, all that sort of stuff. So that's going to be my project for the next 3-4 weeks. What are you guys doing over Christmas, man? I love Christmas. It's going to be nice to have a few weeks without UFC, because we know as soon as we're back in January, it's going to be flat out again, and another busy 2024, which I'm also looking forward to. It's one of those things where, when we have one of these runs with so many UFC events, by the end of it, I'm like, oh my god, I can't wait for some time off. But then you have a couple of weeks off, and then every year I'm itching for the UFC to come back, and I can't wait to get stuck in again. So yeah, thanks so much for watching my videos this year. It means a lot, and we're not going to waste any more time. Let's break down the main event of this weekend's card. It's a brilliant fight between Colby Covington and Leon Edwards. Now, every sort of fight is very different, where, a lot of the time, well, maybe not a lot of the time, but sometimes it's not easy to show why one fighter has the edge over the other with footage, because it's kind of lots of little things that add up. But then other times there are fights where it's very easy to show which fighter has the edge, because like the footage makes it glaringly obvious. It just doesn't lie. It is what it is. It can't really be debated or disputed because of how clear cut it is. And I really feel that that's what we have with this matchup. In my opinion, Colby Covington is a terrible stylistic matchup for Leon Edwards. And if Colby Covington fights smart and uses a grappling heavy game plan, this should be an easy night's work for him. Leon Edwards, I mean, look, there's no such thing as an easy fight at this level of the UFC, at that championship level caliber, but this is a real good stylistic matchup for Colby Covington, and I'll show you footage so that you can understand why. This is Colby's fight to lose. Doesn't mean he'll win, because he's got to use, a specific game plan in order to win. But, if Colby shows up on Saturday night, I think Leon's in a lot of trouble. So we'll kick things off by taking a look at the odds. And we can see, if we just scroll down, where are the odds? We can see that Edwards is the slight favourite at average odds of around 1.63. which is minus 159 for an implied probability of 61%. If we take a look at the odds on Colby, he's around an average of 2.30, which is going to be plus 130 for an implied probability of 43%. So Colby is 35 years old, 5'11" with a 72-inch reach, and Edwards 32 years old, 6'2" with a 74-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size. I do think Leon is more physically imposing, more athletic. I think he's got like that raw power and explosiveness, and he probably will be a bit bigger than Colby. But I think what Colby sacrifices in like raw power, strength, physicality, he makes up for in his cardio and work rate, right? Because there's very few guys that can be, you know, big and powerful and muscular and athletic like Leon and be able to fight at the pace that Colby fights at. So there's trade-offs with every body type. So Colby's the underdog in this fight, but I heavily lean towards him. And I think the reason why so many people favour Leon Edwards this weekend is because, generally speaking, people that watch sports are very, very results orientated. And you'll often hear people say, well, you know, so-and-so beat this guy, so, you know, they should easily beat this next guy, right? And they use a lot of MMA math. And I think because Leon Edwards has fought Kamaru Usman twice, who's obviously one of the best MMA grapplers in the history of the sport, and beaten him twice, and because I think it's fair to say Colby isn't the same level of MMA grappler that Kamaru Usman is, if you look at the entire their entire bodies of work throughout their career, I think people are assuming that because Usman couldn't cause Edwards a problem with his grappling, Colby isn't going to be able to either. And that makes a lot of sense. That's really logical. I'm not criticizing anyone for having that opinion, because it absolutely makes perfect sense. You know, if Kamaru Usman is a better MMA grappler than Colby, and I believe he is, and Kamaru Usman couldn't use grappling to cause Leon a problem, it's kind of crazy to think Colby could if he's not at Usman's level. But the devil is in the detail, and the footage doesn't lie. I'll show you some stuff which may make you feel differently about this one. So my heavy lean in this fight is towards Colby. Now, I do think this fight is going to be decided by grappling. And so if this fight stays standing, Colby is in a lot of trouble. Because we know that Colby does like to stand and bang, but we also know what his style of striking is, right? He's got that, you know, obviously his stance, his style of striking is nothing like Nate Diaz's, but there are similarities between Nate Diaz's striking and Colby's striking in the sense that he's just trying to wear you down with pressure and volume. So he wants to take control of the center of the octagon and just pepper you with shots, right? He's not trying to hurt you too much with each individual shot. He's not trying to knock you out. He's just going to chip away at you, overwhelm you with volume, and wear you down and kind of smother you in pressure. And that's Colby's style of striking. The real problem that Colby's got in this matchup, though, is Leon Edwards is obviously a sniper, right? True legit knockout power in every single limb on his body, and he's lightning fast. And the thing about Colby is, just like Nate Diaz, defensively he's not the best. Because in order for Colby's style of striking to be effective, he needs to continually force you to engage, right? Because if you're not engaging, you're getting opportunities to catch your breath and recover a little and pace yourself. Colby doesn't want that, because Colby's biggest strength is his cardio and his work rate. Very few guys can keep up with the pace that Colby sets. And so Colby knows in order for his style to, you know, be optimal, he can't let off the gas. He needs to continue to come forward and force you to engage. Now, when you're implementing that style against a guy like Jorge Masvidal, who, let's be real, Masvidal's been on a bit of a decline in the last few years. He's smaller than Colby, obviously used to fight at lightweight. You know, and Masvidal, he has got a few big knockouts here and there. Obviously knocked out Darren Till, knocked out Ben Askren, but for the most part, Masvidal didn't really have knockout power. Throughout the majority of his career, he was more of a volume striker. So Masvidal doesn't have that same kind of ability to just land a bomb and put you away in the in a split second like Leon Edwards does. I don't feel Masvidal is as dangerous as Leon Edwards, especially at this stage in his career when they fought, when Masvidal looked like he was on a bit of a decline, or quite a steep decline actually. Again, Usman, sure, Usman's got some knockouts here and there, but again, Usman more of a volume striker, and it's only in very recent years that we've seen Usman, develop that knockout power with his knockout wins over, guys like Masvidal, Gilbert Burns, that kind of thing. Again, with Tyron Woodley, does have big power, but was on a very, very steep decline when he fought Colby. Again, Robbie Lawler, steep decline. Rafael dos Anjos never really had knockout power, even at lightweight. He was more of a volume striker when he was the champ. Damian Maia grappler, Dong Kim grappler, Bayan Barberena volume striker, Max Griffin volume striker, Jonathan Mounier, volume striker, Vorley Alves, power but lightweight, smaller than Colby. Mike Pyle, not really majorly powerful. So the point I'm trying to get to is when you go back through Colby's career, pretty much everyone that he's fought has kind of lacked the power in their hands to make him pay for being this overly aggressive guy that doesn't mind taking a bit of damage and eat a shot to give a shot just to maintain that pressure and continue to kind of overwhelm you with volume. He's, for the most part, fought a lot of guys who are on a very steep decline, or guys that didn't really have the power to hurt him, or guys like Usman that weren't natural strikers, were grapplers that then developed striking later on. So Colby could stand in front of them, smother them with pressure, mix up his striking and grappling very nicely, and just continue to overwhelm them and wear them down. I think Leon Edwards is the first guy Colby's ever fought who possesses the ability to kind of expose how bad Colby is defensively. Because if you think about how Colby's performed over the last few years, where he wants to take control of the center of the octagon, Diaz style, apply relentless pressure, chip away at you from behind the jab, well, it's going to be very difficult to fight in that range against Leon Edwards, because Edwards can land any shot at any time in a split second to knock you out and put you away. So this is a very, very interesting fight, because Colby's not going to be able to use the game plan and strategy that he used against Masvidal or Woodley or Kamaru Usman. Against Edwards, he's going to have to use a very grappling heavy game plan, which we haven't seen him use in a long time. Over the last few years, he's preferred to mix up his striking and grappling. Or we're going to have to see Colby stand very far outside of Edwards' range, where he's not going to be at danger of being knocked out, but he's also not going to be able to use his high pressure style to wear Edwards down like he's done a lot of his past opponents. So Edwards has a huge advantage on the feet, and he holds all the cards, because Colby will have to show Edwards a lot of respect when it comes to striking, or he's going to get knocked out. Like, when you look at Colby busted up and bloodied up in his past fights because he doesn't mind taking that damage to wear his opponents down, you can't do that against someone like Edwards. He's an absolute sniper. He'll knock you out. He'll send you to the Shadow Realm if you try and use that style against him. And to be fair, I think Belal Muhammad kind of found this out the hard way. Yes, obviously the fight ended in round 2 due to an eye poke, but if you go back and watch that first round, Muhammad in many ways has got a very similar style to Colby, in that they both like to take control of the center of the octagon, just apply relentless pressure to their opponents and wear them down with pressure and volume. And Belal Muhammad just couldn't get anything going in that first round, because every time he got close enough to Edwards to kind of smother Edwards in some pressure, he would just start eating bombs, which would hurt him bad, and you'd have to kind of back up and show Edwards a lot more respect. In actual fact, it was Edwards leading the dance at times in that first round, just because Belal Muhammad couldn't get respect in there. So on the feet, Edwards obviously has a huge advantage, and those are the reasons why, when you consider the dynamic, the ranges that they're going to fight in. But when it comes to grappling, for me, Leon Edwards' takedown defense is really, really bad, and his ground game is even worse. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of this. And so it's really important I show you footage to back up what I've just said. And so what I'm going to do is show you footage of Leon Edwards' takedown defense and ground games. You can see it for yourself. And then we can talk about why Colby is such a bad stylistic matchup for him. So what we will do is focus on his most recent fights, because obviously his most recent fights give us the best indication of what to expect from him in the near future. And the 2 fights against Kamaru Usman are absolutely perfect, because Kamaru Usman tries to take him down a lot and has quite a lot of success with it, contrary to what people remember about the fight. So we'll start off and we'll just, this is the most recent fight against Usman. Oh, you know what? Actually, let's do it the other way. So we will watch their first fight, and then we'll watch their second fight, so that you can kind of see that there hasn't really been much improvement in his takedown defense. So, like I always say, right, the only place you'll find truth and honesty in this game is the fight footage. Because the fight footage doesn't lie, the camera doesn't lie, it just is what it is. And what the 2 fights against Usman showed is that Leon Edwards' takedown defense and ground game is really bad. But Usman made a lot of mistakes which kind of let Leon off the hook. And it's Colby's job to go out there and not make the same mistakes that Usman did. He might make the same mistakes, but what we know based on the 2 Usman fights is that Leon Edwards' takedown defense and ground game is so bad that if Colby fights smart, doesn't make the same mistakes that Usman makes, and I'll explain what those mistakes are as we go, should be an easy night's work for Colby. So let's get into it. So obviously, we know Leon has got a huge advantage when it comes to striking. We don't need to focus on striking here. Can all agree on that. So we're just going to focus on the grappling exchanges positions in this fight. So here's the first little look we get at it. First round of their first fight. So I'm also going to be explaining to you the mistakes that Leon makes in these positions and why they will get him into trouble against Colby. So a minute and 20 in, Usman shoots the first takedown, gets in really nice and deep on the legs of Leon. Now, the first mistake Leon makes, and he makes this a lot, and you'll see this repeat over and over again, is that he keeps his legs very, very close together. And what this means is when you shoot in on Leon's legs, it's really easy to get takedowns. Because with his legs being so close together, it's easy to connect your hands around his legs and upset his balance by yanking his legs out from underneath him. If you think about the fighters in the world, the fighters in the history of the UFC who have had some of the best takedown defense. The 2 that spring to mind for me would be Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Jose Aldo. If you go back and watch those 2 when they were fighting wrestlers, really strong offensive wrestlers, look at the Jędrzejczyk fights against Claudio Gadelha, or Jose Aldo's fights against any of the Team Alpha Male guys over the years. What you'll notice is that they create such a wide base with their legs that it's almost like they're doing the splits. And the reason why they do this is to distribute their weight more evenly across a wider surface area. And also, if you widen your legs, your opponents have to work much harder to reach around those wider legs to connect their hands together on a double leg takedown. So it's a big mistake that Leon repeatedly makes in both fights, which means he gets taken down easily. And you can see that here. So Usman, you can see there, his hands are very, very close together because Leon's not really working that hard to keep his legs far apart, and because of that, Usman drags him down. Now, Leon defended the first takedown by posting with a left arm, but Usman didn't really commit too hard to that double leg. You see it, he gets his hands connected there, upsets Leon's balance, but he posts with his right hand to prevent Usman from actually getting him down. But you'll see this mistake continually come back to haunt Leon. Anyway, in this position, Usman keeps a hold of him. Leon goes for a leg sweep, loses his footing, ends up on the bottom. Now, that wasn't a takedown. Obviously, Leon slipped. But what I want you to pay attention to in this position is how weak Leon looks on his back. Now, if you watch my videos every week, you'll know what you want to see from a fighter when they first hit the ground, right? So if we slow this down, you know that when a fighter first gets taken down, I understand Leon's not taken down here, but he is hitting the ground, right? He is going to the ground, right? You know what you want to see from a fighter is as soon as their butt hits the ground, you immediately want to see them explode back up to their feet like a spring, right? You want to see them treat the ground like lava, almost like the canvas is hot and they've burnt their ass and they're trying to explode back up, right? I always use the example of Team Alpha Male guys. You know, the Team Alpha Male alumni, the Danny Castillos, the Chad Mendezes, the Uriah Fabers, the TJ Dillashaw's, the Cody Garbrandts, these guys, right? As soon as they hit the ground, they pop back up to their feet like a spring. That's what you want to see. Whenever you see a fighter do what Leon's about to do, red flag city. Look at how much space Leon's got here as he hits the ground. So he loses his footing on this leg sweep. And look at this. As he hits the ground here, right? Usman's obviously looking to jump into top position. But what you want to see from Leon is immediately roll into his front and get into his knees and trying to explode over to the cage before Usman can get on top of him. Because I understand from this position it's going to be very difficult for Usman to jump on top of him. But from this position, if Usman jumps on top of him, he's in the middle of the octagon. No cage that he can use the wall walk back up to his feet. He's in a very, very difficult position. With the amount of space here, before Usman is on top of him, that fraction of a second that he's got, instinctively, he needs to scramble over to the cage and try and just get to his knees and explode back up to his feet. He might not get back up to, you know, he might not get back up to his feet before Usman gets to a body lock and drags him back down. But at the very least, he's got time to get closer to the cage than he has here. You know, even if he ends up, you know, on the Howler Head logo or something, he's then closer to the cage that he can use to kind of scoot his butt over and start to wall walk. You know, in the middle of the octagon, he's in no man's land. But he doesn't. He just kind of hesitates. Like, he just hesitates, covers up, hesitates, and just invites Usman into guard. And even here, right, if we watch it again, we'll just speed it up a little bit, right? Even when Usman first goes into his guard, watch. Even there, right, there's still a lot of space in there for him to continue. Look, Usman's posturing up and landing ground and pound. He should be trying to scramble over to the cage or give his back up. It's just, when you see a guy like Leon just kind of flop to the ground and give his opponent time to just jump into his guard, it is red flag city. And it's a sign that he's just very, very weak off his back. You can see here he's very, very weak off his back. You know, look at how easily Usman just gets to that body lock. Very, very weak. And this is the start of me explaining the mistake that Usman made in this fight, right? Now, a lot of people will commend Leon for creating a little bit of space here with his left knee and popping back up. Cool, right? Cool. Can't take that away from Leon. He did create space with his left knee. However, I don't want to be harsh towards Leon Edwards, but every once in a while you watch a fighter that wins a fight, and for all of the things that they did well in a fight, it's got just as much to do with the shit that their opponent did wrong, right? So we know Kamaru Usman is one of the best MMA grapplers in the history of the UFC. Crushing grappling control, very strong, very physically imposing. We can tell by Leon Edwards' posture that he's not very strong off his back. What we see repeatedly in the two fights between Usman and Edwards is over and over and over again, when Usman gets Leon Edwards down, he repeatedly gets overly aggressive from top position and repeatedly gives Leon Edwards the space he needs to scramble back up to his feet. And you see it here, right? Look at this. If Usman just focuses on staying heavy and tight from top position, he can stay on top of Leon Edwards for the rest of the round, for the rest of 3 minutes, you know, go to half guard, chip away at him with a bit of ground and pound, but stay heavy and tight to him, stay busy enough from top position so that the ref isn't going to stand you up for inactivity, but don't give Leon Edwards the space to get back up to his feet, because Kamaru knows he's got a huge advantage on the ground. Just like Leon wants to treat the ground like lava, Usman should be thinking, I need to treat the striking ranges like lava, right? Because my edges are on the ground. Former NCAA Division 3 wrestler, right? And that's not what he does. He gets, look at the spacing here that Usman is giving Leon. You can even see the mat through their legs, right? Usman should be really tight to Leon. And in pretty much every single grappling exchange where Usman is the aggressor in both fights, he's more concerned with posturing up and landing ground and pound as opposed to just settling, scoring points, running the clock down, and racking up octagon control and control time, which just doesn't make any sense to me. And because he's busy posturing up trying to get ground and pound, he gives Leon the space he needs to get that left knee in place, to create a little bit of space to pop back up. So he works so hard for that takedown just to kind of give it up by getting overly aggressive with ground and pound. And look, you can let Usman off in that position, right? Because it's very early in the fight. Hasn't felt Edwards out yet. You know, he might have thought it would be easier to hold Edwards down like that than it actually turned out to be. But now he's kind of learned, if you give Edwards a little bit of space on the bottom, he's got the ability to scramble back up to his feet quickly. So Usman should be making this adjustment and thinking, you know, I can't give him that much space when I take him down again. But over the course of the two fights, you'll see he repeatedly makes that mistake. So again, you know, Edwards does a good job of popping back up, but look how easily Usman drags him to the ground off that body lock, right? And then obviously the crazy scramble where they get their legs tied up and Edwards ends up in mount. But we're not focusing on what Edwards can do offensively on the ground. We're focusing on how he looks defensively, because Colby is obviously going to be the aggressor in wrestling positions. So we'll keep going. There's quite a lot of grappling in the two fights that you might have forgotten about, because the majority of the fight was standing, but Usman actually took Leon down quite a few times and just kept letting him back up. So then here we are towards the end of round 2. Usman shoots another double leg and gets it easily. And again, it's because Leon's legs are very close together. Look how easily he gets that takedown. But it's right at the end of the round. But again, Leon, you know, I don't blame Leon for just going to guard at this point in the round, because with only 30 seconds left, it's not worth exerting tons of energy to scramble back up to your feet. But look at how easily Usman got that takedown, and look at how weak Edwards looks off his back. It's not good, man. It's not good. It's not good. Don't need to see it again. Gave up a very, very cheap takedown. Edwards just looks very, very weak off his back. We'll skip through and find more examples. And again here, beginning of round 3. And again, you know, Usman shoots a double leg. And again, look at how close Leon's legs are together. I'll use the examples of Jose Aldo, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. They were practically doing the splits up against the octagon when guys would shoot in on them. Look how close Leon's legs are. It's so easy for Usman to reach around, connect his hands together and upset Leon's balance. And that's exactly what happens here. Like, he's got his hands connected together and just reaps Edwards' legs out from underneath him. But then again, exactly like in the first round, look at how much space Usman gives Leon from top position. You know, look at all that space in there for Leon to try and, you know, push off Usman's legs with his feet and trying to create space to scramble back up. Usman just really shows Leon no respect. He's so aggressive with the ground and pound. And that just gives Edwards opportunities to stand back up. Which ironically Edwards doesn't take for a little bit here. But just look at the space in there. Look how much space he gets, and inevitably Edwards just stands back up. You know, if you think about, you know, really, really good MMA grapplers, you know, think about Khabib or an Islam Makhachev. What makes them so great is that they just don't give you any space to breathe. They stick to you like glue. You never see a fighter like Khabib give a guy that much space on the bottom. You would be stuck to him like glue. He had that crushing grappling control. But Usman just repeatedly lets Edwards off the hook here after putting him in bad positions. And again, in this position here, Usman doesn't really get this takedown. Edwards pops immediately back up. But again, look at how close Leon's legs are together, making it so easy for Usman to connect his hands around his legs. Like, look, you can see there, right? Yeah, you can see. Look how close Edwards' legs are together. So close together. It's so easy. Look how, you know, just before he moved his left leg there, his feet were like this, so close together. Usman didn't really commit to that takedown, so he didn't get it, but he could have. Then he comes right back in again. Look at this. Look how close his legs are together. So then they separate from that position, and then a minute later, Kamaru Usman shoots in again on his legs. Watch this. So Leon backs up. And even in this position, even when Usman isn't shooting takedowns, look at how closely on Edwards' legs are together. Remember the Jose Aldo example, keeping legs very wide apart. Look how close his legs are together. This is just not good, not the correct thing to do. And because of that, look how easily, it's fucking painful to watch. Look at how easily Usman connects his hands together here. Leon's legs are stood so close together. Look at this, his knees practically touch then. So all Usman's got to do is wrap his hands around Leon's legs. Look how easy that was. And just takes him down easily. Easily, easily, easily. And Edwards is just kind of hopeless on the ground. Like, he should be trying to keep his right side super tight to the cage so that Usman can't sneak around the back, get this left hook in and start to take his back. But he just hesitates, and so Usman can get to his back easily. And look at how weak Leon looks in this position. Looks absolutely terrible on the ground. So weak. But again, for some strange reason, Usman starts giving him a ton of space while he fishes for this guillotine. Like, look, he could have just stayed in this back control position. How many times have we seen Khabib get to a position like this? One hook in on the left side, goes to wrist control on the right side so that you can't defend yourself. You can see there, Usman's with the red gloves. He's going wrist control on Leon's right arm. And then Kamaru just uses his left arm, or Khabib would just use his left arm for the ground and pound. And it would be boring, right? It would not be exciting. But the guy on the bottom couldn't do anything about it. Usman again just gets impatient here. Instead of staying in this position, he's like, no, I'll come back around the front. Maybe I can look for something different. And he starts fishing for a guillotine. And it's just like, you know, he wants guillotine, he wants ground and pound. He's just not showing Leon any respect. And he just gives Leon the space to stand back up at the end of the round. When 30 seconds ago, he was in a strong back control position. It's really, really, really bad fight IQ from Usman. He just didn't play smart, didn't play it safe, didn't show Edwards the respect he deserved. Just wasn't good, man. And again, round 4. In on a double leg. Edwards gives up another easy takedown. And again, Edwards just looks so weak off his back. Dreadful. Look how weak he looks off his back. And the irony of this is, in this position, you can see that Usman is staying quite heavy and tight from top position, so he's not giving, he's not giving Leon any space at all in this position. Look how tight they are. There's no daylight in there. And because of that, Leon can't create space off his back. He just has to kind of hold on. Look, Leon's got nothing here because of how heavy Usman is from top position. But then Usman starts to posture up. You know, frees his head there, starts to posture up. Now you can see space in there. Now you can see daylight. Now he starts to want to land ground and pound. And so he gives Leon the space to start standing back up. You know, it's just like mad. You know what I mean? Like, if Usman stays here, right? If Usman stays tight like this, there's only 2.5 minutes left in the round. He can spend the rest of the round in top position. But instead, he wants to posture up and land ground and pound, which gives Leon the space he needs to scramble over to the cage and start standing back up. Just crazy to me. Usman let Leon off the hook big time. And he lets him back up to just take him back down again. Watch this. Watch this. Just shoots back in. Takes him down again. Like, if you're going to let him back up just to take him back down, why let him back up in the first place? It doesn't make any sense to me. It is wild. Crazy. Can't remember if there's any takedowns in round 5. I researched this fight on, like, last Sunday, so all the rounds kind of merge into one, and I can't remember what exactly happened in each round, apart from the fact that Usman obviously gets sent to the Shadow Realm at the end of this round. But there is a takedown here again. Look, double leg. Leon gives it up easily. Look how easily he goes down. His takedown offense is a joke. He posts with his right hand, pops back up. But you know what I mean, persistent grapplers like Colby, Usman, they can just persist with the takedown. They're not going to get tired. They can just keep going. And headshot dead. Anyway, that's just their first fight. We can take a look at their second fight as well. Because same shit in their second fight. No different, really.
Chain of UFC, Leon Edwards.
No different at all. Not much improvement from Mr. Edwards. Now, if you're Kamaru Usman, you would think that you would go and watch that first fight, see all the mistakes you made that I just pointed out, and then think, you know what? This guy has got terrible takedown defense. He's awful on the ground. I'm just going to go full Khabib. I'm going to get the fucking body lock, and I'm just going to ride this guy from back control and punch him 500 times in the head from back control, right? I'm just going to go full Khabib and get my title back. That's what you'd think Usman would do in a logical world. But yeah, UFC, MMA is not a logical sport. And so, instead, Kamaru Usman spends the first fucking 3.5 minutes of round 1 in the rematch kickboxing. And then shoots the first takedown. Then he shoots in. And you can see, has a little bit more trouble connecting his hands together there. Leon stuffs the first takedown. But we'll keep going. Obviously, Leon by now knows what Usman's game plan is going to be, right? He felt him out. He was in there for 25 minutes with him in their first fight. But still, if we scroll through, still plenty of the weaknesses that Leon showed in their first fight is present in this fight. But what's actually remarkable is that Usman appears to use less grappling in the rematch than he did in their first fight. It's insane. So here in round 2, here comes the takedown, in on the double leg, reaps the legs out from underneath Leon, gets the hook in on the left side, and is in that famous Khabib position where Khabib would just ride you from back control, chip away at you with ground and pound. Now, Usman could probably obtain this position early in every round if he wanted to, and just chip away at Leon from that position, but again, falls in love with the ground and pound. Instead of establishing a strong body lock first, you know, strong hooks, Leon just stands back up. Leon shoots a takedown there. And keep going. Hope I'm not boring you, but obviously a lot of people's perception of Leon is that his takedown offense is very good, and so Colby doesn't have much of a chance here. So I just want to show everyone that's not the case. It's not what the footage says anyway. Here we go, round 3. As you can see from where I've skipped through, Usman uses far less grappling in this fight than he did in the first fight, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, because if he got knocked out in the first fight, and Leon Edwards is a striker, and he had so much success with his grappling in the first fight, surely Usman would be thinking, well, if I just grapple more in the second fight, I'm going to win. There you go. He hits a single leg, upsets Leon's balance. Again, look how easily Leon goes down. So easy to upset his balance. And now this time Usman took half guard, which is something that he didn't do for the whole of their first fight. But again, look how much space Usman is giving Leon from top position. Look how much daylight is in there. that Leon can use to create space with his legs. I mean, Leon's very weak off his back. But, fucking hell. Usman is so fucking complacent on the ground. And it's inevitable. If you give a guy as strong and as athletic as Leon Edwards that much space, I mean, epic cage grabs there, to be fair. If you give a guy like Leon Edwards that much space on the bottom with how strong and athletic he is, to stand back up, it's obvious. Just take the space away from him. And he's very, very weak. I just can't believe Usman fucking fumbled the ball as badly as he did in 2 fights. And he fumbled the ball even worse in the second fight because he grappled less. What were you thinking? What were you thinking? I just don't understand. Drives me nuts. Fighters make life really hard for themselves. Very, very hard for themselves. Almost at the end though, thankfully. I don't have to go through the pain of it anymore. What I will say about this fight is Edwards does have a lot more success stuffing takedowns in this fight than he did in the first, but a big part of that is Usman didn't shoot as many takedowns in the second fight. He didn't commit as hard to the takedowns in the second fight. A really good example of that is Leon still makes all the same mistakes in this fight that he did in the first. Yes, he has an overhook here, which makes it more difficult for Usman to drop down and get in on his legs, but still, look at how close together Leon's legs are. Still making the same mistakes from the first fight. Just Usman didn't really shoot takedowns, make him pay. I mean, look, his knees are practically touching. We've already spoken. We've got to create a nice wide base. Because if Usman gets that right arm free from the overhook, straight away he's in on your legs. You're getting taken down. But Usman just fought crazy, crazy dumb in this fight. Don't understand why he didn't use more grappling. I wish I knew. Maybe he was injured. I don't know. But you know, the reason why, Leon had a lot more success stuffing takedowns in this fight is basically because Usman just didn't really try as hard to take him down. Like, look here, Usman shoots a takedown. Leon's legs are crossed over on the wrong side. They're far too close together. Usman easily gets it. But again, fucking doesn't stay tight enough to him, so Leon just kind of slips his legs out and stands back up. Wild, wild mistakes from Usman. They really cost him, man. And this is why I do think this is quite an easy fight for Colby Covington. Colby Covington is a former NCAA Division 1 level wrestler, and we know he's got the cardio to spam takedowns for 25 minutes. He might not be as strong and physically imposing as Kamaru Usman, but you bet your ass he can chain wrestle his ass off for 25 minutes if he wants to. If Colby comes in and just spams takedowns for 25 minutes, I just don't see how he doesn't completely dominate Edwards 50-45. Because I just don't see, with takedown defense this bad and a ground game this bad, how Colby isn't going to just drown Edwards with a grappling heavy game plan. Again, I know Colby doesn't have that crushing grappling control that Kamaru Usman does, but he is so persistent. And it's like Leon, it's just like, look, like Kamaru just stopped really committing hard to the grappling. But Leon's making all the same mistakes. I don't know, man. I don't know. I think Usman might be on a pretty steep decline. I think this fight shows it. Oh, look how close Leon's legs are together. And how easily he goes down. Like I say, he did a better job of keeping the fight standing in this rematch than the first fight. But more so because of the mistakes that Usman made, as opposed to like massive improvements that Edwards made. Yes, he might have gone to an overhook a little bit earlier than he did in the first fight, but his leg positioning is just all wrong, balance all wrong, still weak off his back. So that's basically all I wanted to show you for that fight. And as a result of what I've shown you, it's very, very, very tempting to bet Colby Covington this weekend, because like I've already said, former NCAA Division 1 level wrestler. If he comes in with a grappling heavy game plan, with takedown offense and a ground game that bad, I just don't see how Edwards is going to be able to keep the fight standing for long enough to win a decision, or how he's going to be able to keep Colby off of him. Because if Colby wants to, he can go full John Fitch, right? He can stick the Leon like glue up against the cage, relentless pace, relentless pressure, gritty, grindy chain wrestling. I just don't see Edwards being able to stop that. The only two risk factors really with taking Colby this weekend, and they are significant risk factors, you know, they can't be ignored. The first one would be perhaps Leon Edwards is too strong, too powerful, too physically imposing for Colby to get his grappling going, right? Because we know Kamaru Usman is one of the biggest, strongest, most physically imposing guys in the history of the welterweight division. And if Leon was able to repeatedly stand up after just getting a little bit of space from Usman, that's impressive, because we know Colby can't match Usman's physicality. So it's possible this could be one of those fights where Edwards is just too physically strong, and as a result, Colby's grappling won't be effective. I find that unlikely. Colby is a welterweight, former NCAA Division 1 level guy. I just find that difficult to believe. The second risk factor with betting Colby this weekend is that it's possible Colby won't grapple as much as he should, right? He's got a big ego, he wants to knock everyone out, wants to put on exciting fights. For some reason, Usman didn't feel like he could come in with a grappling heavy game plan. For whatever reason, Colby might not choose to put in a grappling heavy game plan either. He might spend a little bit too much time fucking around on the feet, striking. And Colby's defense is a lot worse than Usman's. He's nowhere near as dangerous offensively, so we can't get much respect in kickboxing range from Leon as Usman could. So it's just one of those fights where I don't trust Colby to use a grappling heavy game plan. But if he does, I think Edwards is screwed. So that's my opinion on this fight. And, you know, this is one of those fights where it's been a brilliant year for pre-fight betting. And we've only had 2 losing months in the whole of 2023. And the way in which I've managed to pull that off is probably for the first year in my betting career, and I've been doing this for 15 years, probably the first year where I have stuck to very, very rigid rules that I haven't broken. And no matter how tempting a bet was, I stuck to those rules. And I stuck to those rules because I know that whenever in the past I've deviated from those rules, yes, I might have won the odd bet here and there, but over a reasonably decent period of time, 2, 3, 4 months, whatever, more often than not, the best I could have hoped for by breaking those rules was break even. And so, as much as Colby is a very tempting bet, he goes outside of the strategy that I've been using for the last 18 months that has worked so well. For that reason, I can't bet him, but he's very tempting. And if you do want to bet this fight this weekend, I think it's 100% dog or pass. Based on what I've just shown you, I think you'd have to be crazy to bet Leon Edwards. But let me know what you think on our Discord. You know, let us know on our Discord, man, what you think. We'll get it up. Let us know in the Discord. Join the Discord on the website, MMABettingTips.com. Let us know on the Discord, man, what you think. Or let us know if you're watching on YouTube in the comments below. Let us know. Get in the Discord, man. Get in the Discord. And let me know about this fight. Because I don't understand why Edwards is the favourite, if I'm honest. So if we look at the over-under on this one, obviously both these guys are tough as nails, very well-rounded. Both kind of decisionators as well, to be fair. If you look at Colby's record, vast majority of his fights go to a decision, and the ones that don't still go very deep. Round 5, round 5, round 3, round 3. And even though Edwards is a devastating sniper on the feet, he's a bit of a decisionator as well. Decision, round 5, decision, you know, decision, round 3, decision, round 3, decision. So while Edwards is very, very dangerous, he doesn't really have the knockouts to back it up. So very likely this fight goes deep, but unfortunately odds reflect that, with the over being, you know, pretty steep favourite odds. In terms of props, Colby by decision is the only one that I would consider, but the odds are kind of terrible. with how dangerous Edwards is, those odds are really, really, really bad. You're probably better off just taking his money line. His odds to win by decision are only 30% better than his money line. And what happens if Edwards gets injured? Blows his knee out throwing a kick, or gets flash knocked out. It could happen. Or finds himself in a bad position, gets mounted and stopped with ground and pound. You know what I mean? So I would just take Colby straight if you really, really want to bet this fight. I'm personally going to be passing on this fight because as difficult it is at times to keep your discipline, stick to a rigid strategy that is quite boring, to be fair. I wish I did place more bets, but ultimately I'm in this game to make money, and I now have a clear-cut, proven strategy that performs extremely well on pre-fight betting, and I know if I stick to that strategy for the rest of my life and I don't deviate, I'm going to make a lot of money betting on MMA. So for that reason, as tempting as it is to bet guys like Colby this weekend, I like money a lot more than winning bets, and so I'm just gonna stick to the strategy, man. I know that's not for everyone. I know it's boring. My lean's Colby, but he doesn't fit the criteria for my strategy, so I'm not gonna bet him, and I'm gonna stick to that because it's worked well for so long. So I hope you found that breakdown useful. Now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be Brandon Royval against Alexandre Pantoja, and I need to kick off the breakdown by saying, I know I've been a whiny little bitch lately. If you're in our Discord, I've been complaining about a lot of shit in the UFC lately, so I do apologise. You have to listen to me moan. But I do have to kick off this breakdown video by saying we got really, really, really unlucky when we bet on Mr. Brandon Moreno to beat Mr. Alexandre Pantoja in his last fight. So, page 2. So we bet 2 units on Brandon Moreno to beat Alexandre Pantoja, and it was obviously a loss, which never feels good, especially because we've maintained a pretty high win rate throughout the whole of 2023 on these pre-fight bets. You can see our win rate pretty good. Across, I know it's only 10 bets, not a massive sample size. We went 8-2 there, which is quite impressive. How do we do on the next page? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 4, not so good. How about the next page? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 3. So yeah, pretty decent win rate, right? Over the whole of 2023. But this was one of those bets where at the time I felt we got a little bit unlucky, and then when I went back earlier this week to research this fight, it was obviously the first time that I got to sit down and watch Brandon Moreno versus Alexandre Pantoja in the cold light of day. It was quite an unlucky loss. It was such a strange fight because pretty much everything that we said in the breakdown video for that fight came true, but Brandon Moreno just kept making catastrophic mistakes at really bad times in the fight to just kind of allow Pantoja to steal rounds, even though he was struggling really bad in the fight. So with a minute and a half left to go in round 2, remember it's a 5-round fight, with a minute and a half left to go in round 2, Daniel Cormier actually said Alexandre Pantoja looks extremely tired, and he was flat-footed, his hand speed was slow, he's taking big deep breaths, he was busted up bad, he took so much damage in that fight. But Moreno kept giving up grappling positions at just really bad times, like 40 seconds to a minute before the end of a few of the rounds. He would just get taken down and end the round on the bottom, or allow Pantoja to get to his back. And so despite the fact that Moreno had been doing great in the majority of the round, inflicted so much damage, we know immediate impact outweighs cumulative effect, and Moreno just kept making silly little mistakes which would allow Pantoja to steal rounds. He did get a bit unlucky with that bet, and I didn't realise how unlucky it was until I watched it back in the cold light of day this week. It was pretty brutal. But because of all the weaknesses that Pantoja did show in the Brandon Moreno fight, I am very interested in this matchup against Brandon Royval because in many ways Royval can cause Pantoja a lot of problems in the same way that Moreno did. Now, unfortunately, I don't think Royval is as well positioned to, make Pantoja pay for the weaknesses that he has. But in a 5-round, 25-minute fight, Royval is absolutely a live underdog here. We can see at the moment he's around about a 2.60 underdog, which is plus 160 for an implied probability of 38%. And we can see that Pantoja is a pretty big favourite at average odds of around 1.53, which is minus 189 for an implied probability of 65%. So Pantoja is 33 years old, 5'5" with a 68-inch reach, and Royval, 31 years old, 5'9" with a 70-inch reach. So we can see, both guys roughly the same age. Royval a lot longer and taller than Pantoja, both roughly the same reach. Bit of a reach advantage for Royval. And to be fair to Royval, he's doing a much better job of using his reach these days. He's starting to use his length. He obviously has a really nice kicking game. Throws nice long range finding kicks, actually quite damaging as well. And is a lot better defensively on the feet. What is interesting about this matchup is that you can't say Pantoja got lucky against Brandon Moreno, because he didn't. Ultimately, he was tough enough, skilled enough and smart enough to make Moreno pay for the mistakes that Moreno made. But Moreno was extremely well positioned to exploit many of Pantoja's weaknesses, and he did. And it was just small mistakes which cost him. What's interesting about this fight is that Royval is also pretty well positioned to exploit a lot of the weaknesses that Pantoja has, but he's not as well positioned to exploit them as Moreno is. And as we talk about how they match up when it comes to striking and grappling, I'll explain why. For that reason, when you see that, Pantoja was able to be a bit opportunistic and jump on mistakes that Moreno made, and that's ultimately why he won the title. If he can do that to Moreno, and Moreno was better positioned to exploit Pantoja's weaknesses than Royval is, you'd have to assume he could probably do it to Royval as well. So my lean is Pantoja in this fight, but Royval's 100% a live underdog. And let's talk about the reasons why. So first of all, we know that it is an undeniable fact that Pantoja's cardio isn't great, and he slows down a lot as fights wear on. It's just the way it is. Now, because he slows down in every fight, he's very comfortable fighting tired. He's one of these guys that's tough as nails. He's an absolute dog. And when he gets really tired, he still keeps pushing. He still keeps going. You can never count him out. But we know after round 1, he starts to slow down significantly. So that's the first, kind of way in which Royval's a very live underdog. Because we know Royval is one of these guys that's got amazing cardio, right? He can put it on you non-stop, never gets tired, never slows down. So Pantoja is going to be forced to fight at a very high pace here, and Royval is still going to be pushing an extremely high pace into that 4th and 5th round, a pace that Pantoja is not going to be comfortable fighting at, because midway through the 2nd he's going to be pretty tired. So that's one of the first areas where Royval can cause Pantoja big problems here. Pantoja can't keep up with the pace that Royval sets. Now on the feet is really interesting, because Pantoja fights like a middleweight. That's not a good thing. Pantoja is one of these guys that has got a good amount of power in his hands, right? For a flyweight, he hits hard. He doesn't have tons of knockouts or anything like that, but when Pantoja lands on you, you can see that he hurts guys. He does inflict a lot of damage. He lands impactful shots. But he's also very flat-footed and very slow. He's quite heavy set. And because he's quite flat-footed and slow, in a division full of really fast guys, because it's the lightest weight class, in the UFC for men, and as a result, most flyweights are very fast and light on their feet. because of that, Royval's pretty bad defensively, and he's slower on the feet than almost everyone that he faces. But because he's so tough, it doesn't really matter that he's really bad defensively. He kind of gets away with it with how tough he is and how hard he hits. What's interesting about this fight is that Royval is also very bad defensively, but he's getting better in that department. His footwork is a lot better, his movement is a lot better, he's a lot better at using his length these days. He's got a really nice kicking game. And what I'd expect to see in this fight is Pantoja have a lot of success early, because when Pantoja is fresh and he's fast and his hand speed is good and he's still accurate, that's when he can really expose the fact that Royval's striking defense is bad, and he can really pick Royval off as Royval comes in, not moving his head very much, right? That's where Pantoja can have a lot of success. But the longer the fight goes, as Pantoja starts to get sloppy and tired, I actually think the length and the awkwardness and the volume of Royval can really start to cause Pantoja problems, because Royval's very good at overwhelming guys and peppering them with his long kicking game. You think about the Kara France fight. As soon as he sensed that Kara France was hurt or tired, in that instance he was hurt, but you can see that Royval is one of these guys that has that killer instinct, in the sense that if he senses weakness on the feet, if he thinks he's landed a shot that hurt you, or that you might be getting a little bit tired, he's just going to swarm you and bum rush you and not let you off the hook. And that's a guy like Pantoja's worst nightmare, because what Pantoja wants is to take breaks in fights so that he can pace himself. He's hoping that when he lands a big shot on you, you feel his power, you kind of stand back and show him a little bit of respect so he can take 10-20 seconds to catch his breath. A guy like Royval doesn't really play that game, and he doesn't mind putting himself in harm's way and putting himself in danger, similar to Colby, to force you to continually engage, because he knows he might not be able to beat you when it comes to striking with technique, because he's not as technical as you. He might not be able to beat you in striking by landing like powerful hard shots, because he's not the most powerful guy. So his edge in striking, exactly like Colby's, is to overwhelm you with his work rate and volume. And for a guy like Pantoja, that can be trouble, because there's no doubt that Pantoja's the better striker, but is Pantoja the better striker in round 4 when he's gassed out of his mind and Royval's still throwing 30-40 strikes around at him? I'm not so sure. In actual fact, I'd probably lean more towards Royval on the feet the longer the fight goes. But what we saw in Pantoja's fight against Moreno is the longer the fight goes, the worse Pantoja gets on the feet. And as that fight was progressing, Moreno was doing significant damage on the feet, because Pantoja just becomes tired and sloppy, can't match the volume of his opponent to get respect from them, and defensively he gets very bad, so he just takes tons of damage, and his chin's great and he's tough as nails, but he gets busted up pretty bad. But what Pantoja can do in this fight, which he also did to Moreno, but I think have a lot more success doing it against Royval, is alleviating pressure that he gets put on the feet with grappling. So when I mentioned earlier in this breakdown that we got really unlucky by losing that bet on Moreno, the reason why we got so unlucky is that Moreno is one of these guys that is very difficult to control. Like, you can take him down, but on the ground he's very scrambly, very good at working his way back up to his feet. What Pantoja did a really good job of in that fight is getting Moreno down and obtaining a dominant position before Moreno was able to scramble back up to his feet. So in the breakdown video this week that we did for Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman, I was really critical of Usman for how much space he gave Edwards in grappling positions, which just enabled Edwards to continually pop back up to his feet. Well, Pantoja did the opposite. He gave Moreno no space, and so he's very quick at obtaining dominant positions off takedowns, very, very quick at taking space away from Moreno. So when Pantoja did obtain dominant positions, he was able to hold them for a long time, rack up a lot of points, and run the clock down, even though he was very tired. That was surprising to me, because it's not easy for a grappler who is fresh to take a guy like Moreno down and obtain a dominant position. Yet Pantoja continued to do it when he was absolutely gassed out of his mind. And so where Pantoja is a much more difficult opponent for Royval than he was for Moreno, is that Royval's takedown defense is really bad, and he's not as good at working through bad positions as Moreno is. He's not as good at scrambling back up to his feet. So this is one of those fights where I think Pantoja can have a lot of success with his grappling. Royval's takedown offense is really, really bad. His ground game is based in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so he is scrambly on the ground, but he's not the most physically strong guy. He's quite lean and lanky and doesn't have that raw physicality. We were talking about this with Colby, right? Every body type's got a trade-off. The reason why Colby can fight at a crazy pace is because he doesn't have that crushing physicality or power or athleticism. Same with Royval. You know, he has amazing cardio. He can sprint for 25 minutes without getting tired, but the trade-off is he's quite physically weak, especially in grappling positions. And so this is one of those fights where, because Pantoja is the opposite, he does slow down a lot in fights, but he also has that crushing physicality on the ground. It's possible that when he does run into trouble on the feet, when he starts to get tired because Royval's overwhelming him, Pantoja is just going to be able to change levels, hit a takedown, control Royval on the ground easily, and basically do exactly what he did to Moreno, steal rounds with takedowns and grappling control. And I think Royval will have a much harder job of stuffing takedowns and working his way back up to his feet than Moreno did. And basically what I'm trying to say is, if Pantoja can do that to Moreno, very good chance he can do it to Royval as well, because Moreno is very difficult to take down and control. But because Pantoja slows a lot in fights, Royval's definitely a live underdog here. So that's how I see these two matching up. My lean is Pantoja, just because, you know, how can you not favour him when, even though he was completely gassed out of his mind, he was still able to obtain dominant positions and keep them, even in the 5th round against Moreno. You know, Royval's nowhere near as scrambly as Moreno, so you've got to lean towards Pantoja, but there's no way I would bet him at these odds. I just wouldn't be betting a guy with bad cardio in a 25-minute fight in this odds range. It just wouldn't make sense to me. But at the same time, I can't bet Royval either because of what Pantoja did to Moreno, and I think Moreno's a lot better than Moreno's a lot better than Royval. So in terms of the over-under on this one, I actually think it is more likely the fight ends inside the distance. Unfortunately, the odds reflect that, with it being steep favourite odds. Now, both guys are very tough. Both guys are very well-rounded. But the reason why I think this fight will end inside the distance, I'm not sure about which round. I think it's quite likely to go over 2.5 rounds, maybe even over 3.5 rounds, but I think it's unlikely to go past the 4th and the 5th. The reason why I feel that way is because Royval has got one of these kill or be killed styles, where he's wild, he's aggressive, he's relentless. He always forces you to engage. And whenever you've got a guy like that, something's got to give. If he's forcing you to engage on the feet, we know Pantoja's probably not going to be able to keep up with that crazy, relentless pace that Royval likes to fight at on the feet. So someone's got to get knocked out. Or, on the ground, you know, both of them dangerous submission grapplers. And so, you know, you're either going to see a situation where Pantoja is way too skilled for Royval on the ground and he submits him, or perhaps Pantoja becomes too tired to defend himself in the second half of the fight because of how scrambly Royval is, and then maybe Royval submits Pantoja, right? I know Pantoja's a much higher level on the ground than Royval, but if Pantoja's too tired to defend himself and Royval catches him in a bad position, you could see, you know, Royval getting a submission late on. So I do think it's more likely the fight ends inside the distance, but that's obviously reflected by the odds, with them being, you know, really steep favourite odds. Now, in terms of the props for this one, in terms of the props, You might want to look at props like Royval to win in round 4 and round 5. Obviously, they're not particularly likely to hit, but the pace the Royval fights at, how tired Pantoja gets, and you don't have to win many bets in this odds range to earn a profit long term. So, might want to hit that. Some outside gambles. I won't be betting them myself. I don't like props, but if you do want to sprinkle a little bit of money on the fight to make watching it more interesting, if you like to gamble for fun, you know, might want to sprinkle a few dollars on that. So I hope you found that breakdown useful. Now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be Stephen Thompson against Shavkat Rakhmonov. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Rakhmonov is the biggest favourite on the card at average odds of around 1.15, which is going to be minus 667 for an implied probability of 87%. If we take a look at the odds on Thompson, he's around an average of 5.70, which is going to be plus 470 for an implied probability of 18%. So Rakhmonov, 29 years old, 6'1" with a 77-inch reach. Stephen Thompson, 40 years old, 6 foot tall, with a 75-inch reach. So we can see both guys roughly the same size. However, there's a huge 11-year age gap, which means statistically Rakhmonov would win this around 70% of the time. The younger fighter wins around 70% of the time when there's an 11-year age gap in a fight. And of course, you know, these guys are kind of at the stage in their careers where the age stat is really meaningful, because at 40 years old, we know Thompson's at that stage in his career where he's going to be declining significantly from fight to fight. And Rakhmonov at 29 years old, he's still going to be improving. He's absolutely in his prime. So this is not like when a 35-year-old will fight a 24-year-old. You know, a 40-year-old fighting a 29-year-old usually ends very, very badly for the older guy. And of course, this is a terrible stylistic matchup for Stephen Thompson. We know that he's an elite striker, great striker, you know, amazing striker. But Shavkat Rakhmonov's striking is pretty fucking good as well. And he proved to us in the Jeff Neal fight that he's also tough as nails with a granite chin. Jeff Neal landed some absolute bombs in that fight. Rakhmonov took everything. And to be fair to Stephen Thompson, obviously he does have some knockouts in his career, but for the most part, he's more of a volume striker that chips away at you, outpoints you. So, you know, on the feet, Thompson might be able to hold his own. He's got a tricky style, he's very experienced, but the power, the athleticism, the physicality, the explosiveness all goes towards Rakhmonov. I wouldn't be surprised to see Rakhmonov knock Thompson out in this fight, just because of the stage of Thompson's career that he's at, 40 years old. He's been in so many wars, taken so much damage. You know, he's had close to 25 pro MMA fights, over 60 pro kickboxing matches. All that damage he's taken over the years has got to take his toll on his chin at some point. And Rakhmonov's an absolute savage. But outside the striking, we know that Rakhmonov is also an absolute elite MMA grappler. And we know, based on Stephen Thompson's fights over the last few years against both Belal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns, that Stephen Thompson's takedown offense and ground game is really, really bad. So I think the thing that justifies Rakhmonov's odds in this fight is that if he comes in with a grappling heavy game plan, he can easily take Stephen Thompson down anytime he wants and absolutely dominate him on the ground. To be fair, I don't think he will. I think Rakhmonov will like to stand and strike in this one, because you know, he had opportunities to grapple more against Jeff Neal, and he chose to stand and bang instead and try and prove a point and put on an exciting fight. So I think he will spend a decent amount of time standing and striking against Stephen Thompson. But at this stage in their careers, I favour Rakhmonov on the feet as well, just because Father Time is undefeated. I love Stephen Thompson, legend of the sport. He's had so many amazing fights, but it's just not easy for a 40-year-old striker to compete with guys like Rakhmonov. You know, they're both at very different stages of their career. So at this point in their careers, I think Rakhmonov can beat Thompson wherever the fight goes. And yeah, it's obviously a bit of a dead fight for betting because of the odds. You know, I certainly wouldn't be betting any MMA fighter in this odds range. There's just very little risk or, you know, very little upside in betting a fighter in this odds range. But at the same time, there's no way I would be betting Thompson. Anything can happen. Thompson can find a way to win, perhaps, but I think he loses this a very high percentage of the time. So this fight is not for me. In terms of the over-under, for me, whether the fight goes the distance or not really depends on how much grappling Rakhmonov uses. If Rakhmonov were to come in with a grappling heavy game plan, I just think he would overwhelm Thompson on the ground with how bad Thompson looked on the ground against Gilbert Burns. Just overwhelm him, tie him up in a position where he can't defend himself and just stop him with ground and pound. But if it stays standing, I could see a little bit like the Jeff Neal fight, where it kind of goes very deep and you have some back and forth. It's quite competitive. So it's very difficult for me to have a strong opinion on the over-under without knowing how much grappling Rakhmonov is likely to use. So I don't really have a strong opinion on that. And for that same reason, without really having a good read on what game plan and strategy Rakhmonov is going to use, how much grappling he's going to use, it's kind of difficult to cook up a prop for you as well. So yeah, I would give the props a miss on that one, which I know is a bit boring because obviously if you can't bet money line, you want to look at the over-unders and the props, right? But I think that fight's pretty dead overall. Now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be Paddy Pimblett against Tony Ferguson. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Paddy Pimblett is the favourite at average odds of around 1.33, which is going to be minus 303 for an implied probability of 75%. If we take a look at the odds on his opponent, Ferguson, he's around an average of 3.40, which is going to be plus 240 for an implied probability of 29%. So Ferguson, 39 years old, 5'11", with a 76.5 inch reach. Paddy, 28 years old, 5'10", with a 73 inch reach. So a couple of X factors on this one. We'll start off with the reach because that's probably the easiest one to talk about. Ferguson's got a nice 3.5 inch reach advantage, even though they're roughly the same height. Now, at this stage in their careers, I don't think the reach is going to matter very much. Ferguson doesn't really use his reach anymore, doesn't fight particularly long, and Paddy's one of these guys that doesn't really respect his opponent's range anyway. He just comes forward throwing big wide looping hooks. So I don't think reach is going to matter much in this fight. I do think the other X factor, which is age, is going to matter a lot though, because as we can see, there's another 11-year age gap in this fight, and we already know from Rakhmonov versus Thompson that statistically the younger fighter wins around 70% of the time when there's an 11-year age gap in a fight. So already very strong trend on Paddy Pimblett's side. And I think the difference with this fight compared to the Rakhmonov-Thompson fight is obviously Thompson is still in, relatively recent history put on pretty impressive performances against guys still in their prime like Kevin Holland, right? So even though we know Thompson will be declining because it's impossible for him not to decline at his age, we haven't really seen like a massive decline in Stephen Thompson. He doesn't look wholly different from how he did 5 years ago. Whereas obviously with Tony Ferguson, we have seen a steep decline in him physically, and he's looking worse and worse in every fight. So we absolutely know Father Time is hitting Ferguson pretty hard, and as a result, that makes this a much more difficult fight for him. Now, whenever I'm researching a guy like Tony Ferguson or a guy like Clay Guida the Foot recently, or even a guy like Josh Emmett who's also fighting on this card, or Stephen Thompson for that matter, because I've been watching these guys for so long, they've had so many fights, the perception of them in my mind can be very different from the reality, right? Because when I'm thinking about Tony Ferguson, I'm thinking about his strengths and weaknesses from his entire career, and it's very difficult for me to focus more on where he's at in 2023, right? Because Tony Ferguson isn't going to be capable of doing the same things in 2023 as he was in 2013. And so that's why watching fight footage is so important to research these fights, because you get to see where guys are actually at this moment in time. And when I went back and watched Tony Ferguson's recent fights, it is difficult because, going into researching this matchup, I thought Tony Ferguson could be a nightmare stylistic opponent for Paddy, because if we think about what have been Paddy's biggest weaknesses throughout his career, is that he slows down as fights wear on. And Ferguson basically built a career off, applying relentless pressure to guys, breaking them with his volume, his aggression, his work rate. So if you think about, Ferguson's body of work throughout his career, and we think about what Paddy's biggest weakness is, well, Tony's pretty well positioned to exploit that weakness. Now, MMA is a crazy sport. You know, it's a big event this weekend. You know, Tony's going to be feeding off the energy of the crowd. He's an absolute dog. You can never count him out. You know, I wouldn't rule out the possibility that Tony does break Paddy in there with his volume, his pace, and his pressure. But one thing that is very apparent when you watch footage of these two guys recently is that Paddy is like a strong, athletic guy. I don't think from a technical point of view Paddy's particularly good anywhere. On the feet, he's very bad defensively, leaves his chin up high and exposed. And on the ground, he also makes a lot of mistakes. He's quite weak off his back. He gives up position a lot. But he is a strong guy. He hits very hard, and he's physically imposing on the ground. And it goes back to what we've spoken about, you know, with other guys on this card, right? How every body type has got, you know, different trade-offs, different strengths, different weaknesses. And again, I think one of the trade-offs from Paddy being so physically strong and hitting so hard is the fact that his cardio's not the best. And so this fight's quite difficult for Tony Ferguson because on the feet, you know, his reflexes have gone. He's not the best defensively. He takes a lot of damage in fights. He can't really get respect in there anymore because he can't hurt guys with his strikes anymore. He just doesn't have that that physically imposing body anymore that can land hard, impactful shots. Whereas even though Paddy's not the most technical, when he throws, when he lets his hands go, he does fully commit to everything that he throws and he does hit hard. And even though he's bad defensively, Ferguson doesn't really have the power to make him pay for that. Whereas Paddy's really got the power in his hands to hurt Tony Ferguson in this fight. And I wouldn't be surprised if Paddy knocks Ferguson out just because there's a huge difference between power and athleticism in this matchup. Now, when you look at the grappling between these two, obviously Tony Ferguson, high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt under Eddie Bravo, 10th Planet BJJ. Paddy Pimblett is predominantly a grappler, also a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I believe. But on paper, Tony is levels and levels and levels and levels and levels above Paddy on the ground, right? We frequently see Paddy give up cheap takedowns, look weak off his back, give up position a lot on the ground. He's got great back control, nasty rear naked chokes, but Paddy makes a lot of mistakes on the ground. And so again, coming into research in this fight, I was optimistic that you never lose your technique and Ferguson may be able to, you know, kind of make Paddy pay for some of the mistakes that he makes on the ground, and perhaps Ferguson could have a lot of success with his grappling. When you look at Ferguson's fights from over the last few years, again, you can just see the Father Time has hit him really hard, and nowhere is it more obvious than on the ground. Because whenever we see this guy on the ground, it doesn't matter whether he's fighting Charles Oliveira or Bobby Green, you can see that he's just very physically weak, and anyone that he faces is just able to overwhelm him on the ground with strength. And you can see his body's just frail. It just doesn't have the same physicality that he used to. And I hate talking about this. I hate talking about Tony like this. He's one of my favourite fighters ever. He's entertained us for so many years. And, you know, it's just been a pleasure to watch. He's had an incredible career. But unfortunately, Father Time is undefeated. And now when he goes up against these guys like Paddy, his heart and his toughness and his technique, they're not enough anymore. You know, he needs the athleticism, the power, the strength to go with it. He just doesn't have that anymore. So, you know, this is one of those fights that Tony is a live underdog. He is. You can't say he's not. At the end of the day, he's built a career off fighting at a high pace and breaking guys, and Paddy slows as fights wear on. However, in order to get Paddy tired, you've got to engage him. I think if Ferguson does engage Paddy, he's probably going to get knocked out on the feet or overpowered and ragdolled on the ground for a good while until Paddy might slow in the second half of the fight. But by then, Tony might be too beat up, too hurt to really capitalise on it and make Paddy pay. So Paddy should get this done. Obviously, with him being a big favourite, he's not at all interesting to me from a betting point of view. You know, he's just not interesting to me from a betting point of view. Can't bet him at these odds, but I wouldn't be betting Tony either in this fight. In terms of the over-under on this one, I do think it's more likely the fight ends inside the distance. just because I do think Tony is very fragile at this stage in his career. However, he's also tough as fucking nails, and you know, still not easy to put away. Still at this stage in his career, he can still take one hell of a beating. He's gone deep in all of his fights over the last few years, apart from the Chandler one. So even though this fight is more likely to end inside the distance, I wouldn't count Tony out here. He's a dog. Zero quitting him. He'll keep fighting till his last breath, and it's always dangerous betting on the enders in fights where you've got a guy like Tony Ferguson who's more likely to get finished, and he's just got no quitting him at all. So in terms of the props, you know what? I actually think the most likely outcome is Paddy by knockout or TKO, because he does hit very hard and he's very aggressive, and Ferguson's reflexes are shot. So I think Paddy probably, you know, by knockout or TKO, probably the most likely outcome. But the odds aren't great. The odds aren't great. So you know me, I'm not a lover of props anyway. So I hope you found that useful. If you did, please hit the like button below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great Christmas and New Year's. And we'll be back in 2024 with another breakdown video very soon. Love you all. Nice one, guys. Thank you very much for watching. And take care. I'll see you all very soon. Nice one, guys. Bye.